This is the triumphal entry from the book of Matthew for this Sunday, Palm Sunday. When they had come near Jerusalem and had reached Bethpage, the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent two disciples, saying to them, "Go into the village ahead of you, and immediately you will find a donkey and a colt with her. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, just say this: the Lord needs them, and he will send them immediately." This took place to fulfill what had been spoken through the prophet, saying, "Tell the daughter of Zion, look, your king is coming to you, humble and mounted on a donkey and on a colt, the foal of a donkey." The disciples went and did as Jesus had directed them. They brought the donkey and the colt and put the cloaks on them, and he sat on them. A very large crowd spread their coats on the road, and others cut branches from the trees and spread them on the road. The crowds that went ahead of him and that followed him were shouting, "Hosanna to the Son of David! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest heaven." When he entered Jerusalem, the whole city was in turmoil, asking, "Who is this?" The crowds were saying, "This is the prophet Jesus from Nazareth in Galilee." I don't remember how old I was, maybe in junior high or maybe older, probably older actually. We went to Chicago to see a parade. In this parade were the astronauts, probably the first ones on the moon. So this would have been in 70. I would have been in high school probably, or this around that time. And these were the astronauts who had been on the moon, and they were in this parade through downtown Chicago, and we were there to see them. And this takes a typical triumphal entry. We've heard of ticker tape parades thrown for championships. At the end of a war, especially World War II, there were ticker tape parades that were thrown for the servicemen coming home. Triumphal entries do have a certain formula, but Jesus does not do it the prescribed way. Other examples of triumphal entries, a little different: the Nazis entering Paris, the obligatory May Day parades in Russia and other communist countries, where we see the soldiers goose-stepping, and in North Korea, military displays. The trappings of these triumphal entries are well known. The latest in military machinery is on display, whether it be horses or chariots, missiles, tanks, large capacity armament. The people respond with accolades, whether because they're being paid or because they are threatened by their party leader and the secret police. The leader is an undisputed strongman, whether Pilate or Caesar, Hitler or Kim Jong-un. His face, and isn't it always a he, is known throughout the land. He uses his parade to bolster his own power and position and that of a select ruling class. The religious establishment quickly falls in line. The triumphal entry displays the might of empire, simultaneously encouraging the few in power while frightening the masses into subservience. And certainly they were used to this kind of entry in Jerusalem, where the Romans would probably come through on a periodic basis with the Roman governor on a white stallion and soldiers marching close behind. But Jesus does it all wrong. Instead of entering Jerusalem on a tank, or he uses a tractor. Instead of a white stallion, a donkey and a colt. Neither an army nor the rich and famous accompanied Jesus on his march. Instead, his disciples, a ragtag group of fishermen, common folk, and at least one disreputable tax collector, make up the entourage. Is it any wonder that in this chapter, the 21st chapter of the Gospel of Matthew, religious officials will question Jesus' authority, eventually seeking to have him arrested? The establishment fears Jesus, and the masses shout his praises. It's a reversal of the whole point of a triumphal entry. And after all, isn't Jesus all about reversals? But Jesus isn't the only one. Matthew is keen to connect Jesus to Hebrew scriptures. The king who would save Jerusalem comes not in a show of might, but humbly. This image of the king on a donkey evokes another unlikely hero of Jerusalem, other unlikely heroes of Jerusalem, younger sons, barren women, foreigners. Jesus' humility calls to mind his ancestor David, a shepherd boy who put all his trust in God and became king. The rise of ones like this, so unlikely it can only be interpreted as an act of God. The crowds cry out, praise and bless the one who comes in God's name. There are contemporary examples of these alternative triumphal entries too. Martin Luther King Jr., Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. led the people on foot to Washington. Mahatma Gandhi on the Salt March in India. Greta Thunberg, a mere teenager, recently stood before the UN. The masked protesters and their struggle in the streets of Hong Kong. They are joined by countless others around the world whose names and faces are not known by history. Suffragettes seeking the vote, labor organizers demanding worker rights, indigenous people standing up for their native lands, school children protesting gun violence, women gathered to call for change. They follow in Jesus' path, knowing full well that the accolades they hear can, and often do, devolve into mockery and violence. After all, these alternative triumphal entries threaten the status quo. John the Baptist was martyred, as were most of Jesus' disciples. Gandhi and the Reverend Dr. King were assassinated. Current protest leaders face ridicule and worse. While violence need not be inevitable, the Palm Sunday parade, and all its successors boldly proclaim that humble heroes know the whole passion story from start to finish and continue their work anyway. Hosanna means save us. And there are people who need to be saved even now, even if it costs something. There are some things that are worth dying for. Blessed be the one who comes in the name of the Lord. For those who do the work of God, there are no unexpected blessings. For those who do the work of God, there are unexpected blessings. Hope when all seems hopeless, peace beyond all understanding, love beyond measure, life beyond death. In other words, the parade at the beginning does indeed lead to an empty tomb at the end. It's a different kind of triumphal entry, but one more lasting and more sure. And that is the good news.